Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever. Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice Trifecta Collective. And today I am by myself and wanted to do maybe a little bit of a different episode. So I wanted to talk today about being a coach, building a business, like a health coaching business. And I'm recording this at the end of April here. It probably won't come out until the beginning of May. But this month marks two big milestones for me. One is I've officially been in the health and wellness industry for 10 years as of this month. Also hit the 5-year mark on this particular business. So I wanted to chat more about this. And, certainly if you are a coach, a practitioner, a trainer of some sort within the industry, you will likely find this pretty helpful, especially if you are interested in running and growing a successful business. We also get a lot of questions from clients too of, when you go through your own health and healing journey and you've had so many issues and then you find a way to actually heal, a lot of people do get interested in kind of the health and wellness industry overall. And potentially we've had clients go into some of this, some of the same trainings that we have done, maybe some different types of coaching programs. And, they think they want to run a business, which is amazing and great. And I wanted to talk today about how I've done it, how I've kind of grown this practice and a lot of the struggles, a lot of the mistakes, things that I've made. I'll say I've also done several rounds of business mentorship programs where I've worked with other practitioners. I'm in a lot of groups with other types of trainers, practitioners, coaches, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of mistakes, a lot of things people don't think about. And so I really just want to talk about it all, the good, the bad, everything in between, just some things that some people don't often think about when coming into the coaching space and or wanting to build a business, because this is, being a coach, being a trainer, being a practitioner is one thing. Building a business it can be something totally different. And so I just kind of want to shed some light on all of that and yeah, and share a little bit more about my story and kind of how I got into this space, a lot of my failures, and a lot of the things that have helped me run and grow a very successful business. I'll also say I typically I'm not great always at talking about the business side of things and being really open about a lot of our successes. I've run now a multiple 6-figure coaching business, which is unusual in this space. That is also not typically super common. Most people don't end up running a business, especially one that is focused on coaching people, training and coaching other practitioners or other trainers. There's a lot of money in that space, a lot of business coaching programs, even, there can be a lot of money in that. And we have done a really good job. And I'm going to talk all about this of how do you really want to work with people and what this can really look like, and just once again things to think about when getting into the space and also in growing your own business. So I think the first thing I want to share is going back into kind of my work history. So, and once again, I don't typically share this a lot, only because I don't find it always super relevant in sharing my own health journey. But this also does play a really big role in things that I've learned and how I've grown a successful business. So My first job out of college was a sales job. And I was in outside sales, so I was going business to business. So I had that sales experience from very early on. Um, and I do think that does make a difference in that, a lot of the skills, I'm gonna call it skills, or trauma traits, that I kind of picked up growing up, especially in regards to matching people, that really helped me do well in the sales industry because I was really good at talking to people and meeting people where they were and almost like matching people. And I think, especially early on, when I was like 21, 22, to my detriment, I was still doing that. And that came from growing up in an unstable household with an alcoholic, of always trying to keep the peace and matching and being whoever I needed to be able to keep the peace. And once again, like, while I don't think that's great, it did serve me early on in my career. I did very well in that sales position. I got promoted quite quickly, and I ended up running my own business in the outside sales world at 22. Um, I was not ready to do it at 22. I made a lot of mistakes, and but I learned a lot. And I think for me, I have always, while there were challenges and difficulties doing that, and there were some really tough times for me, I always took lessons, quote unquote failures, as a way to learn. And I think that is very unique. And I think that's one of the things that really has served me throughout my entire career is, okay, if this didn't work out, what can I learn? As opposed to, I failed, I'm not good at this, I'm never going to do this again. And while there may have been moments of that, and still continue to be moments of that, by and large, I always took it as lessons. The other thing that I learned really on in sales is I may not have been always the best, quote unquote, salesperson, but I was always willing to work the hardest. And that made a difference. And, if you've ever been in sales, there's sales funnels. And this is something that, once again, like, this was ingrained in me very early on in my professional career, which, once again, I think has served me very well. Of like, I remember, and I still like over remember this so vividly, of, when we look at the sales funnel, the way that I was taught in this industry that I was in was, okay, you will probably need to talk to about 50 people in a day. Out of those 50 people, you might see 12 to 15 business owners, people who can actually, decision makers, people who can actually make a decision, on changes, on actually, like, buying what I was selling. Out of those 12 to 15 people, there'd probably be like 5 to 7 of those who would be even open to talking to me and to maybe like showing me what they were currently using, and so I could do like a price comparison and things like that. And then out of those 5 to 7 people, 1 to 2 would actually buy. So it was almost like, for me, my brain was trained very early on that every no that I heard was one step closer to a yes. And I knew that if I saw those 50 people in a day, and yes, sometimes it was more, no, sometimes it was not that many either. And especially as I got better, those margins got a lot better, in that every no was closer to a yes, and not to take the no's quite so hard, because it's part of the process, and not everyone is going to buy, not everyone's going to want to talk to me, all that kind of stuff. And so, going into running my own business and what I'm doing now, I still think about that. And it's, I know 100% of the people that I talk to are not going to buy from us, are not ready, are maybe financially can't do it, aren't in the place. Maybe we just aren't a good fit. And so for me, I don't take those so personally, which is a really big thing in the coaching industry, especially if you want to sell your own services of any sort. You're going to have some sort of sales funnel, and not everyone's going to say yes. And that can be very challenging for many people, especially I find that for women, this can be a hit a little bit harder. And I think it's just something to really think about. And if you haven't been in the sales industry before, that's something to really think about. So, starting the sales industry, being a business owner very young, I also did have a lot of support as a business owner. Like I had someone to do like all of my books, like all of the tax stuff. I had a lot of really close mentors. And there was like a really systematic way of doing this. So it wasn't quite the same as what I would consider like what I do now. But I do think just like being a business owner and being responsible for your own business and understanding the freedom and the stress and the headaches and learning a lot about how to manage other people, that went a really long way and has served me quite a bit in building the business that I have now. I got really burnt out in that industry. I was working 60 to 100 hours a week up until I was about 25, 26, when I started phasing out of that industry. And the burnout became so real. Being in the sales industry, it was really focused, especially outside sales. It was mostly younger people. There was a lot of the culture of it was really revolved around like drinking and things like that, didn't prioritize health. And that's ultimately what led me into the fitness industry is, I was so burnt out. I felt so bad. I was doing, I was not eating super well. I was so crazy addicted to caffeine. I mean, I'd have coffee in the morning and then at least one or two energy drinks throughout the day, if not more coffee, and it was just not good. Sleep wasn't great. I was still on, by and large, like all of my anti-anxiety and all of my antidepressant meds. Throughout this, not only was I just like really burnt out, but my mental and emotional health was really suffering even while on meds. Um, so I ended up getting certified as a personal trainer. It was just kind of a whim. I had started getting back into the gym and just realized how much I enjoyed being in the gym. And that's what led me to get my personal training certification. And during that time, I had a business partner. And so that I ended up working out my schedule where I, would work like 6 or 7 a.m. until like 1 or 2 p.m. At my business. And then I would head to the gym and I would have a handful of clients usually in the afternoons. So, which surprisingly, it actually did help with my burnout, even though I was still working quite a bit. And I was still really not prioritizing a lot of the things I needed to prioritize. But there were some shifts here. And, I was a personal trainer and then I got into group fitness. I did boot camp classes. I got certified if you're familiar with the group exercise programs that are out there, in a couple of the Lace Mills programs, which are group exercises. And a HIT class, there was a HIT class that I got trained in pretty early on and taught that for many years, which was good in the moment and definitely contributed to long-term health issues and cortisol issues and things like that. And I see that I look back now at a lot of the women who participated in my classes and, towards the end of my more traditional fitness career, I started having a real problem with seeing like people that were in the classes and being like, this is not serving you, this is not right. But I had experience with that. And then a little over a year later, it was a year and maybe like 3 or 4 months, I got offered a general management position and decided to step out of the business that I was running into this. And did that for about a year, also learned a lot during this time about management. I was, a couple things, that I experienced with that. Like, yes, I was managing a lot of young people. I was also still struggling a lot with a lot of my own issues, especially like mental and emotional issues. I had gotten off all of my meds, and fitness was a way to manage my mental and emotional health. Not that it was great, and I was able to manage it without meds, which was a benefit. But I saw a lot of issues here too. I was the only female in a management position outside of the group exercise programs. was also the youngest, and there were a lot of, and a GM is really like you're managing your staff and selling. And that's really what gym management is by and large, is you're responsible for basically all the sales and selling memberships and selling personal training and things like that, and managing your staff. And, in the gym world, typically you're managing a lot of younger people, which has its benefits and comes with its own challenges too. So, did that for a little over a year, left that, and then I was kind of doing a few things around this time. I had gotten into like boxing and kickboxing kind of stuff. So I was working, part-time there. I ended up with a job at a mobile personal training company doing personal training work, and I was doing a few things here. And then my next like big position that I ended up in with this mobile personal training company is being the GM of this mobile personal training company. And I did that for man, I think it was right around 4 years, and I ended up earning like part ownership within the company and things like that. My first year as the GM, things really skyrocketed and the business started to do really well and things like that. And I also had my own issues within that company too, and how they were running things and even just the concept of the mobile personal training and just the personal training field. And that was also pretty early on while I was doing that is when I got in my car accident and all of my own health issues like really escalated and, started in the Western medicine world and then got into the functional medicine world. And I had about a year overlap, a little over a year, almost a year and a half, not quite a year and a half overlap between being the GM of that company and then also running this company. I went full time in July of 2021, I believe it was, but I started this business unofficially in February of 2020, and then super officially, filing my tax ID and things like that in um, April of 2020, which is where the 5-year anniversary is coming into play here. So, and I started off as doing functional movement within the health and wellness space, doing some work with nutrition, more macro based, and that pretty quickly evolved into more of the functional health and has really evolved ever since. And I'll tell you, 2020, I was in the online space, which was very new to me. I was not a social media person. I had running an in-person business versus running a virtual business was very different. And there was a huge, huge learning curve across many, many, many different aspects that I didn't even realize I really needed to learn and change and figure a lot of things out. One of the things though that I did very early on, and I am a huge proponent of this, is I hired a business coach. Like I started in March of 2020 with a business coach, specifically for this business. And I, she was also new to the business coaching space. However, she had built a business in the holistic health world that I was really impressed with. I had been following her for a very long time, and I was a huge fan. She was also my introduction into energy healing and really a deeper dive into some different ways of regulating the nervous system and how our thoughts, how our programming influences not only our own health, but also the way we run a business. And this is a piece of running a coaching business that I think is really important that I don't think enough people talk about. So I am not at this moment, but I am going to touch on this here too, because I do think this is a huge mistake for a lot of people in the coaching industry not to focus on this aspect because it plays such a big role here. As does our nervous system, our programming play huge roles in our overall life in general. 2020, I mean, I was not making a lot of money. 2021, a little bit more, and also not a ton. It was really 2022 that things started to shift and change. And that was the first year that we hit 6 figures, and then we doubled that really quickly. And we've done multiple 6-figure years the last several years now. So, and you know, And there are a lot of things that go into that too, which I'm also going to talk about. So when I really went full time, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot coming up for me around doing that. I'll also say, I had that initial business coach. I worked with her for probably a year-ish, and then I went into like a different type of business kind of coaching, more of group style coaching that had some individual aspects within it, and it was more geared towards fitness people versus like holistic health people, but there were a couple people in there, and I did see some benefit and value with that. And then I stayed with them for maybe 6 to 8 months before I moved on to a different business coach. So it's really only been like no, we're coming up on almost a year that I haven't been working with a business coach. Maybe not even. Maybe it's been closer to like 7 months. And I also, last year I did like a business revitalization kind of thing with someone that I was a previous client who I knew really well, and wanted to dive deeper into different aspects of the business. And so with business coaches, a couple of things to think about when you're going to invest in some sort of business coaching is, have they built a business similar to what you would like to do? What kind of skills and tangible things are they teaching you that, even if they aren't necessarily in the same industry, how does that apply to what you want to do? Business coaching can also be very expensive. And so really think about the investment that you're doing, and also understand that, business coaches have different values. And I've had the variety of business coaches on purpose because I've wanted different things out of the business. And I've purposely chosen people who I felt like could help and support me in running the business, having a good foundation, escalating the business, upscaling the business in different ways. And I've sought out specific people to help me in specific areas of that. And so I think that's really important, that for me, I really wanted to start with someone who had built a business similar to what I was looking to build. And then as that's gone on, it's really about refining things. Last year I did like this full long day meeting, and did like a full business, I forget what she calls it, but like a business evaluation. And one of the reasons why I sought her out specifically is I wanted to really upgrade our systems. My brain is not very system oriented. If you're into human design, I'm a manifesting generator. No, I don't have ADD or ADHD, and I do like different things. And I really am into like flowing within my own energy. Okay, what is lighting me up now? Like, how can I focus on that? And I'm not always super great at some of the more technical side of things. And so I was seeking someone out who could help me with more of the technical side of things, of like, all right, we're at a point where we have to build out some systems to continue to grow. And what does that look like? How do we do that? How do we get some support within that to make sure that our systems are in a good spot, that we have them? How do we shift and change what we do have into that so that we can continue to grow? And also for me, it was really like, how do we develop more systems so I don't have to work as much? Even when I was first working within the business, I was still working. I think now is the least amount I work, and I probably work still probably like 30 to 45 hours a week, kind of depending on the week. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less. But really, last year, when I made a lot of changes, one of the goals within the business was for me to be able to step out a little bit more and not be quite so in the business all of the time and be quite so drained. I wanted some more open space to allow some more creativity and flow, and actually be able to live a life that I really wanted to enjoy. And for me, and I see this with a lot of, quote unquote, type A people who are very focused within, you know, business and their job, and a lot of their worth is coming from that, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And invitation to maybe think about some of these things too, because I was that person and I would get offended if someone like, well, what do you do in your free time? Like, what kind of hobbies? Like, what do you like to do? And I'd be like, work is my whole life. I don't want to have kids. So like work is almost like my quote unquote baby. And how do I grow and develop and nurture my baby? Realizing that was a trauma response of I wasn't living a life I wanted to live. And so how do I escape that? I work. And so for me, over the last year, little over a year, a lot of it has been shifting that. Okay, now I do want to live a life. How do I still run and grow a business and support people and do what I love and do what I'm really passionate about? And have more of a flow, more of and I don't actually like this word balance, but how do I kind of have both? And what does that really look like? And I'll say for me, I'm still figuring that out, and we're, about to do a bigger, deeper inner work into what does this really look like. And there are going to be some shifts and changes that come within the business, probably not necessarily outward facing, potentially, we'll see. But really, how do we do this and how do we revamp this? And I'm super excited to do this. If you don't know, obviously we talk, Shannon's on the podcast. We have Brendan, who's one of our other practitioners, but there's also a woman who's been with me. She was the very first person I ever brought onto the business. She's a VA, technically an admin. And she's my work wife. She's my right hand man, right hand woman. She is, such a huge support in my life from a business perspective. And also, I'm so fortunate that she's become a very close friend and is a very big personal support for me. And I got super lucky because she was the first person I brought into the business. I'll also talk about that too here, but a lot of the revamping work comes from her and I together working as a team. So yeah, and we kind of do this a couple times a year. Obviously last year we did a lot of changes. This year I have a feeling we're also going to be doing quite a few changes here, which I'm super excited about. And I already have some thoughts and excited. She's going to be here with me in Arizona, and we're gonna have we've actually never met, so I'm like super excited to be able to work with her together in an in-person capacity. While I think the virtual stuff is great and there's so much that can be done, there is a little bit of a difference of doing some things in person. So um yeah, and so we continue to do that. By the way, I continue to think about our systems, our coaching styles, our protocols, like how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to get better and serve more people and help more people? And that was a huge reason why we started the podcast in general. It was not a way to make money. It was really a way to continue to build on the education that we already put out through social media, and how can we do this in a different way, in a longer form way where, not doing like a 7-second video on cortisol. All right, well, can we take a deeper dive into cortisol? Like, how do we share all the things that we'd like to share in a longer format? So, yeah, super excited about that. I feel like that was a little bit of a tangent, but super important. Just like the people that you bring on your team have so much value and can shape the business. But it's something also like businesses are continuously growing and expanding and changing and shifting, and that's part of running a business. And if you're not great with that, if you're not great at letting go of some control, something to think about, and something that may push you out of your comfort zone, which I think is a really good thing and can be uncomfortable. Anytime we're pushed outside of our comfort zone, there can be discomfort, and it's just because it's new. It's not because you're not good at it. It's not because you can't do it. It's because it's new. It's unfamiliar, and that is really a lot of running a business is just getting out of your comfort zone. It's a lot of decisions. It's a lot of trying and oftentimes failing. I'll tell you that we've launched many, many programs, done many things, and I think more have failed than have succeeded. And once again, coming from my sales background, while it can hurt for sure, I'm not saying it doesn't hurt when, we put something out there and we don't get, the response that we'd like to see. For me, it's just like, okay, well, that didn't work out. We're one step closer to finding something else that will resonate, that is more in alignment, that will succeed, and that is different. And I've once again, I've worked with a lot of business owners. I've worked with a lot of coaches, And I'm in a lot of groups with a lot of coaches and fellow business owners in the health and wellness space. And that can be hard. And I think for me, I don't, I've thought about how I would like to phrase this. Is there some delusion within this? Yeah, probably. Is there almost like an innate sense of just like, I know deep down this is 100% what I'm meant to do. And so I'm gonna just make it work with whatever it is. And if something fails, that's okay. Something else is going to work. And it's just a matter of, okay, well, what is that thing? So that is a valuable trait to have. And one of the downfalls I really see is I actually don't think most people, at least most people that I've worked with, they don't actually want to run a business. They get into this space because they love to coach people, they love to help people, they have their own journey and experience, and running a business is a totally different ballgame. And you're not only the coach, you're coming up with protocols, especially in what we do, like protocols and nutritional plans and different support and all the things like that. But you're also marketing, you're handling the finances, especially early on, you're the bookkeeper, all of the decisions that need to be made, it's on you. And if you've never run a business before, that can feel super scary, super overwhelming. And what I find for the majority, not all, is that they don't want to do that. Is they really just want to coach, and they got into this space because they want to coach, they want to help people, not because they actually want to run a business. And so I think that's something to, before you do decide you want to run a business, think about that. And you are obviously welcome to change your mind at any point in time. And I encourage you to think about it early on and think there are limited jobs out there in the health and coaching space. And so sometimes you do, have to run your own business for a little bit to get some more experience. And it is also not for everyone. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, thank goodness I have the practitioners that I have with me. They're amazing and great and just like super, super awesome. I'll also tell you the last round of hiring that I did, I think it was 52 applicants for the practitioner position. And so sorting through all the applications and then, the interview process. And I did a two-step interview process. And, all of these things, I also vetted people on their social media and their content and were they running their own business and what did that look like and what kind of experience do they have? And I actually, for me, it's a real balance of sometimes I prefer people with less experience because then I can train them in our systems and our ways of thinking. And sometimes there's a lot that goes into that too, and that can be more work. So, but it's just something to think about that it's going to be hard. It's a real roller coaster, and you're doing a lot more than just the thing that you love. And once again, I think that is okay. I've gotten a lot better. I've learned a lot about a lot of things in running a business. I'll also tell you, for me, finances, the budgeting and taxes. And yes, I do have an accountant that works for me, and I do largely some of my own bookkeeping still and things like that. It's a lot. And it is not my favorite thing. And I've just kind of had to get over that because it is so important. And there is a level of, okay, I'm releasing the story that I'm not good at this, which is part of the reason why I don't like it, because I feel like I'm not good at it. And what can I learn? Once again, like I've learned a lot from my business coaches on the financial side of things. And, I having had experience running businesses before, whether that's for myself or for other people, I've learned a lot. And there were a lot of benefits to that. And also understanding that I'm not going to love 100% of everything that I do. And that is okay. I don't have to love 100% of my job as long as I love most of it. That's what is most important for me. And I love the consults. I love talking to people. I love educating people and just seeing the progress of how far people can come. Like that's what lights me up. And that is most of what I do. It's not all of what I do, but it is most of it. And so I do enjoy that. Um, so that's a piece of running a business. I think a big important piece too is, do you want to run an in-person business? Do you want to run an online business? Do you want to do a combination? And for me, having run an in-person business for the last several years before I started this business, I actually was very clear going into that I wanted to do something completely virtual. I unknowingly was kind of building this business so that I could travel. And it just so happened that last year was the year that really took off, that I started to be able to do that and be able to enjoy the benefits of working from anywhere, essentially. For me, I also knew that I really wanted to do mostly client-facing work, and meaning that I wanted to do mostly coaching work. We do have a DIY program called Life Force Ignite, which I think is great. I think it's awesome. It's not super what I want to do long term. Now, there is another program in the back of my mind, a DIY type program. There's actually two that I've thought about building. I haven't pulled the trigger yet, and it's a potential in the future. And for me, the client-facing work is so valuable. And for me, our approach, the way we do things, and the complexity of cases that we work with, DIY programs aren't going to cut it for the most of the people that we work with personally. That doesn't say that there isn't so much value in DIY programs or, group coaching programs. We technically have a group coaching program, but it's not structured as a group coaching program. I like that. I like the complex cases. I like puzzles. I like having to think through things. So I knew that's what I wanted to work with. And that's even when I was doing more of like functional movement. The last like stint of personal training that I actually did was with chronic people in chronic pain. And there was not an easy solution to a lot of those. It was complex. There was a lot of digging for root causes on, our kind of the movements that we were used to. How do we unpack those? How do we shift those? How do we change those so that the body can be in a more optimal place? But I also don't think everyone needs that. I also knew I needed some additional training to work at the level that I wanted to work, which is why, I have so many trainings at this point, with functional labs, with blood work, with nervous system regulation work, with the psychedelic work. For me, that's all layers to be able to help people heal on deeper levels. And once again, I like the complex cases. Our practice largely works with mostly complex cases. Yeah, we work with some not as complex cases, which is always fun and a little bit easier for sure, and we see results sooner. And the complex cases are fun. For me, like it's fun. Like, how do we unpack all of these layers? But once again, like that's what's fun for me. That's what I enjoy. So that's the business I've built. So many people can benefit from really basic things, within the health and wellness space of like, how do we build out macros? How do we learn how to build meals? How do we start to change habits? In which case, really basic programs can go a very, very long way. And I've worked with many, many people, business in the coaching space as more of a mentorship role of thinking that they need all of these advanced certifications and they have to read labs and they have to be able to order labs and they have to do all of this stuff. You don't. Also, this is being very big in the fitness space in general right now, and nutrition coaching from like people who are more focused on like macros and weight loss and things like that, is they are learning blood work, but not in a good way. I'm in some of these groups and I mean, it takes everything almost like not to like jump out of my skin, seeing some of the posts and comments and things like that of people who are not fully trained in reading labs, and they're using spreadsheets of just like plugging and chugging, being like, okay, this is out of range. Like, this is what this means. Take this supplement, take this supplement. When the ranges are not, when we look at the holistic health space, and we really dive into the research and what the research tells us, they're missing the boat pretty extensively. They're also, remember, like any functional testing, I'm also including blood work here. It's not just about the tests themselves and the individual markers, but how do we put all of it together? And if you are not learning how to put everything together, you can cause more harm than good. And that is something to think about. And it's not saying, I'm not trying to be scary or say, don't do this. And as someone who was injured by a practitioner in the health and wellness space who went through a typically recognized as good program in the health and wellness space, this program is taught by a functional medicine doctor who is very well known. They do not do a good job. And once again, like I was hurt for years as a result of this because someone didn't know how to read my iron markers properly and appropriately. And once again, I see this all the time in this space. And, I see this with thyroid issues. I see this with gut issues. And those are kind of like the three big ones that I really see in this space. And you can do some real harm for some other people if you are not fully trained appropriately. The other thing to really think about within this space is your scope of practice. And it can be easy or simpler to think you know everything. And, the more trainings I've had, the more time I've worked with people, the more I realize I don't know. And so it's almost like it's been eye-opening into being like, oh my gosh, like how much have I not known? And it really almost has pushed me into more of my scope of practice and having zero problems referring out when I feel like something is out of my scope and being like, nope, I've never seen this before. This could be alarming. Like, nope, I am referring out. And there are some really hard and fast rules that we have within our business that we refer out to. Children, we will work with like teenagers. Typically, it's 15, 16 and up is kind of like the age that we will make some exceptions with, depending on and it really does depend a little bit on the person and the situation and things like that. So children, especially small children, out of our scope of practice. Things are so different. Children are so different. Labs are different. Like protocols need to be way different. So no, we will not work with children. Cancer is another really big one that we will not work with. And once again, like I'm learning a lot right now, going through the situation with my partner, going through cancer treatment. And there's so much I don't know. And I'm digging into research. I'm also, like I'm asking the oncologist a ton of questions and just learning more about their approach and then applying what I know to certain things. And, okay, well, what are you concerned about if with this particular supplement or with this lifestyle thing or way to support, someone's body? Like, why don't you want someone to do some of these things? What is the reasoning behind it so that I can apply it to what I know maybe actually be beneficial and isn't going to impact, cancer treatment. But I feel comfortable doing that with my partner because we are working so closely with his medical team. And that's another case. If someone's going through active cancer treatment, get through your cancer treatment. I can certainly make some general recommendations for you to run past your oncologist. Now, after the fact, that's where I do feel really comfortable. Okay, you had cancer treatment. Okay, but what was the root cause? Why did the cancer come up in the first place? Same thing goes with autoimmunity. Why did the autoimmunity come in the first place? These are symptoms, in my opinion, from all the training, once again, all the training that I received. And so it's like, okay, well, what is your scope of practice? What areas do you need to refer out to from a legal perspective, but also being really honest and upfront with the clientele that you're working with? And I'll tell you, anytime I've ever said to someone, I don't know, either let me go find out, let me ask one of my mentors who may know the answer, or hey, this is a better question for someone else because this is not where I'm trained and this is not my area of specialty. I've only been welcomed with thanks for being like, hey, thank you. I appreciate you like not lying to me and trying to make something up because you've never heard or experienced or worked with something like this. So don't be afraid to be like, look, this is not my area of expertise. Like, let me take this question. Maybe let me do some more research on it. Let me refer you out to someone else. Let me, like whatever it is. I think that's really valuable. Was is also valuable going into this is your legal documents and insurance. When we think about starting a business, there's a lot of things that go into effect. And I think people make the mistake early on in not really setting up their business appropriately. You should register with the government. And there are a lot of benefits for doing this. And you can also do most of this yourself. It's quite easy. You need to register within your state. Like you should set up a separate business account. By the way, most business accounts are free, especially at local credit unions. And I know for mine, it was $100 deposit is all I needed to have in that bank account. And that was my investment into the business initially. So think about that. Having liability waivers, legal documentation, and you can some business programs will come up with that and have some examples for you. Lawyers can be quite expensive. There's also some online ways to connect with lawyers and get things. There's also there's a woman named Sam Vader, Vader. I'm almost positive that's her name. And I've used some of her legal documentation. She is a lawyer and comes up with some sample different things, like sample legal documents to help you and support you in your business. So there are a lot of resources that are cheaper. I will say a couple years ago, I had a client who was a lawyer. She gave me a little bit of a discount on her services. By a little bit, I do mean quite a significant discount, like a half off discount. And she went through all of our documents and made a lot of changes and upgrades. And we talked through some things to think about and all that kind of stuff. But super, super important. Also having boundaries and expectations. What is actually included in your services? What is the cost? How the frequency of meetings? What kind of support outside of meetings are you available? Time frames for communication, appropriate forms of communication, and also how do you prefer to be communicated with? For me, email is still by and large my preference. However, within our clients, largely that is done through our client management software that we have, and that is our preferred method that way. My personal preference, just because I don't work with a ton of clients, is email. And so I have that outlined both in depending on if someone is going to work with me directly, which is pretty rare nowadays. Email is going to be my preferred method of communication. What hours are you going to work? We say give us 48 hours for communication within normal business hours, which is Monday through Friday, and we have set business hours. The other thing to think about is cancellations, refunds, like all that kind of stuff. Because guess what? If you don't have that stuff up front, you're going to learn the hard way. And I've seen too many people, and I have fallen in this category a little bit, but once again, with my experience running a business, I was a little bit more protective of this coming into it. But people are going to cancel. People are going to ask for refunds. People are not going to be super happy with your services, or could not be super happy with your services. Expectation. There could be expectations that were never communicated that were seemingly put on you. So these are just like all things to think about. And I'll say we've had very, very little issues over the years with anything in regards to this, thankfully, and largely because we have so many things in place up front. And we try to be very, very, very clear. We do not hide anything. We're clear about payments and like the time and things like that. And all of that is also outlined in all of our liability waivers that we do. We also need insurance. If you're going to be working with people, you need some sort of liability insurance. If you're working virtually, it's a little different than if you're working with someone in person. So just some things to think about there too. All of it is important. And I think a really big piece of this is, in running a business, you have to communicate with your audience. Who is your audience? Who are you trying to work with? Who are you trying to talk to? Where are these people? How do they consume content? How do you connect with them? What does that look like? Is it in person? Is it virtually? Is it social media? Is it a specific platform? Is it multiple platforms? Like all of that's really important. And I see a lot of people trying to run virtual businesses, not on social media. And sure, I think there is a way. I don't know a great way. I'm sure there are people out there who have come up with this. For me, social media is such a big thing that if you do want to run a virtual business of any sort, social media is going to have to be part of this. And with social media, obviously education is important. But here's the other thing. People need to trust you. People want to know you. People are more likely to buy from you as a human because they trust you than they are because of a particular package or service or things like that. Which means you need to share some of your stuff. You need to likely be on camera. And look, I am super comfortable on camera at this point, and it took a couple years for me to do that. And if you look back at some of our older content, like, no, these videos were not good. I'm still not good at editing them. Any of our more highly edited videos was not me. It is my VA who does that. She is much better at the editing and things like that. But I'm very comfortable talking on camera, just talking. And it is a skill. It was a skill that I was not very good at or very comfortable with. I thought I had to wear makeup and look a certain way and things like that. And I'll tell you, 95% of our content, I am not wearing makeup. Most of the time my hair is down now. It does feel more feminine to me, which is why I do it. I actually dried my hair for the first time in I don't even know how many months. I didn't even fully dry my hair, just like dried it for like 5 minutes so it didn't look quite as wet. For me, like I don't super care because I don't find it really matters. I remember there was one content pretty early on where once again, like I've never worn a lot of makeup. I also, if you look at our older content, I was in sweats and my hair was up all of the time because that's how I dressed as a personal trainer. And that's how I came into this industry initially. And that's what I was doing. I was wearing, sweatpants, a t-shirt, maybe a tank top. My hair was up, no makeup, and that was just how I looked. Now just the way I dress naturally is a little bit different, and I do dress in things that make me feel more feminine, which means more dresses. I usually have a necklace on. I have a couple rings on. My hair is usually down. I still don't wear makeup most of the time. Maybe once a week for the podcast. Maybe one other time, but not usually. Usually it's just on the podcasting days. I'll put a little bit of makeup on. It's not a lot, by the way. It takes me about 5 to 7 minutes at most to put on the makeup that I do have on. But that's a big thing that I see from people. Well, I need to like dress a certain way. I need to look a certain way. I need to have the right angle and the equipment and da da da. No, you don't. Those are all excuses. This came up not just a couple days ago in one of the groups that I'm in, and one of my mentors who's also built a very successful business, a different business, but a very successful business. We were talking, and he was like, "Yep, cell phone, AirPods, and a computer," and that is the entire thing, and not good lighting. Was how he built his business. And for me, it's been like, my phone. I have an Android phone. I don't upgrade my phone very often. It's like every maybe 3 or 4 years at most. I'm not big on technology changes because I'm not the best with technology. I have a new computer now, but I had my old computer for about 7 or 8 years, and it really became a requirement to get a new computer. Nothing crazy as far as my computer is concerned. I have a pretty cheap but decent webcam that I often use. I have a cheap ring light. It's like, I don't know, it was like $20 or $30. Headphones. I'll use like things like headphones that connect into my computer for some things. And that's it. I have not spent a lot of money on a lot of like really nice equipment and things like that. Like with technology, the camera on your computer or your phone, often it's going to be enough. And things don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have these highly edited videos or look a certain way or talk a certain way. Like, be yourself. That's like the biggest thing that I can recommend. Because once again, if you're not being yourself, you're not going to attract people that are really going to be a good fit for you. And then it's going to be really challenging. It's going to be like trudging up a hill, and it's going to be a real uphill battle, which is not fun, not super comfortable. Being yourself is the best way to attract the people, because if you are yourself in your presentation, when people come to work with you and you're still the same version of yourself, people are going to notice that, and people are going to see that, people are going to feel that. And that's a really important thing. I think the last big piece, two kind of last big pieces. I'm going to save the like programming mental emotional piece for last. I want to talk about one other piece here first. For me, and once again, I knew this pretty early on in the creation of my business because I had run other businesses before. For me, I wanted to build a bigger business. I knew I didn't want it to be just me. I knew eventually I was going to bring on other people. I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but I knew for me that I did want to grow and scale and things like that. Which you don't have to. You can run a highly successful business, just you by yourself. There are going to be limitations because you're only one person and you don't want to burn out in potentially how big your business can grow, and you can start developing wait lists, and that maybe that is where like some DIY programs or more group style programs can come into play at that point in time. But for me, I knew I was eventually going to bring people on. So hiring people and then managing people, this is a whole other ballgame. And I will say I wasn't a good manager for a long time. And it took a lot of time to learn. It took a lot of time to, once again, like really figure out who I am and the kinds of people that I want to bring on. For me, I'm also not afraid to bring on, and I actually seek these people out of, can I find people who are smarter than me? And especially smarter than me in certain areas that maybe I'm not as good at. So, especially like, for example, when I wanted to bring an admin on, for me, I knew I wanted to bring someone on who could handle some tasks that I didn't want to do, comments and DMs from social media, some email stuff. But really, I am not good on the technical side. So I wanted someone who could build out systems and had some experience already with that, because I knew I wasn't very good at it. I also just like didn't care, but I knew it was an important part of the business. So I wanted someone who could come in with some experience and be able to apply some of the things that she's done with other practices within my practice. And that is who I brought on. And thank goodness, because once again, like she such an amazing person and human, and I just like couldn't be more grateful for her. And she takes such a behind the scenes role within the business, and she definitely doesn't get outwardly as much credit as I think she should get. But she is amazing, and I tell her that all the time, so she does know it. But yeah, I mean, managing other people, and yeah, sometimes you don't get very lucky. I have been very lucky, and I'll also say a lot of my experience coming into this field has helped in hiring the right type of people. And also, there is a learning experience. And no, like, there are some things that I would do differently now. If, when I bring someone on, things have done differently when I brought on Brendan versus when I brought on Shannon. And, when we bring on the next person, like, there are some things that I'll probably do a little bit differently. And that's not because it's better or worse. It's just there are some things that I can see that maybe I haven't done the best, that maybe I can do better. And once again, like for me, I'm all about, okay, well, what can I do better? Like, where are some areas that maybe I'm not doing the best or could show up a little bit better, or set clearer expectations, or my communication could be a little bit different. Also, like, depends on the person. For me, like when I bring someone on, I like to know their human design. I like to know their, more astrological background. I like to know how they like to be communicated with and things like that, because that helps me be clear and communicate better and show up better and serve my other practitioners better based on how they work. And and being flexible in how I work to not necessarily cater, but be very clear, and be able to communicate with them and show up how they like to be shown up. Do they prefer, what are their love languages is the other one. Do they like a lot of praise? Do they like gifts? Like, what is their love language so that I can make sure that they have satisfaction on their side. And I'm, being able to express myself in a way that suits them really well. So those are all some real things to think about. It's also like, employee versus 1099. That's a whole thing, setting up your business, C Corp versus S Corp, LLC, sole proprietor, all things to think about. And I highly recommend just doing research on all of that. And, I'd say LLC for most people is typically the way to go. Separating your business and your personal assets, it can go a really long way. But those are a lot of technical things. The other big thing here in running a business and growing a business is your own programming. And this really impacts your business. A couple things that I often see: people pleasing patterns, not being able to sell really well because you're so scared to like tell people the truth and to quote unquote sell. And for me, just because of my extensive sales experience and the way that I embody things, I don't really, and I've gone through enough trainings in this industry, especially with male coaches, of like they are super salesy. And for me, it feels gross. It feels slimy oftentimes. And I feel very comfortable doing sales because for me, it's just I'm telling people what is the truth for me. What am I seeing? What does this look like? And there's a confidence really that helps me do well because I so believe in what we do. We have amazing results for people. I've been in this industry for long enough that I've seen a lot of the mistakes and all that kind of stuff that I believe so much in what we do, and I know the benefits and I know how we're so different from other people that it almost makes sales easy, in my opinion. And no, that doesn't mean everyone buys from us. Once again, this goes into like, I know not everyone's going to buy from us, and that's a real thing. But are you afraid to show up on camera because you don't feel like you look a certain way? Or that's a really big one, by the way, and that's the one I hear most often is, well, I don't look the part. What is the part supposed to look like? Are you supposed to, have six-pack abs? Are you supposed to be, a certain weight or look a certain way? I don't think that is the answer. I think looking healthy is good, just if you are going to be in the space looking healthy, but healthy doesn't have a particular look necessarily. There's no weight attached to that. There's no, your skin doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have a six pack. You don't have to be super thin. Your hair doesn't have to look great. You don't have to wear makeup. Like, none of that's a requirement. It's, do you just look healthy? And there are people who are super thin who I don't think look healthy, and there are people on the other end who I also don't think look super healthy. And so it's like there's such a range here, but I think if you are embodying what you're talking about, you're gonna look healthy. And size isn't really playing a role here. It's just a matter of like how you look, how you're showing up. Like, do you actually look healthy and like you're embodying the things that you're talking about? And that doesn't mean you also have to be perfect either. If you're still going through healing protocols, that's fine. Talk about it. People want to know, people want to learn. And it's not, I think people get embarrassed and being like, no, I live this perfect life. Like, no, I don't live a perfect life. Like I've shared here recently, like my hormones are not in the best spot. Like, and I'm okay with it for right now. I'm doing what I can, and I'm in an incredibly stressful situation for a period of time right now, and that's okay. And I'm totally comfortable and okay with sharing that. My gut health has been so good, and that's because of all of the work that I've done. I'm still continuing to do all kinds of nervous system regulation work and liver supporting work and things like that. And once again, like I'm happy to share all of that and be able to share all of that because I'm a real person and I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still trying to do my best, and I think that does go a long way. But what other programs are you running? Programs around money. Like, do you think you actually can run a business? Do you think you can be successful? Do you think you can be successful and not have to work 60 to 80 hours a week? Like, really think about all of these programs that you're running in your brain because they will come out in your business. I can guarantee that. And so, like, having the technical side, like going through a lot of these things, that I've already shared and talked about, super important. And if you, I love the phrase, and I think this was from Vince Lombardi, of like, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that's 100% the way I have viewed business. And I'll tell you, and you can talk to Shannon and Brendan and Andy, our VA, like, whenever my energy is really good and I'm embodying my own energy and I'm like in it and like really doing like brain retraining, brain rewiring work, like that's when the business does the best. And when my energy is off or weird, or I'm like really like in the depths of working through some big programming things for myself, that's when we'll slow down a little bit. And I've been running this business long enough that I know that. They also all know that we really go through these cycles here. And it's gotten so much better. We used to have like real big spikes and then dips and spikes and dips. And it's real like, once again, it's like riding the waves of healing. Like our dips and spikes are really like this now instead of like real drastic of like really big, like all of a sudden we're getting a bunch of clients and then we're not getting any clients and then we're getting a lot. So just some things to think about. And the ebbs and flow of business is real. It's never going to be, you're never going to be on top of the world 100% of the time because guess what? You can't. You typically cannot handle that. And you can have a big influx, you can have a small influx, and having the systems in place is a really big important piece of that because their onboarding clients typically is a lot of work up front. Typically gets easier over time, but the more systems you have in place to do that, the easier it is. So yeah, those are a lot of things to think about. I'll say the last thing to really think about here. And if you're in kind of like a human service kind of industry that's really broad, but just if you're working with other people, another thing to just really think about here, and this is particularly true with coaches, is, when I first became a personal trainer, I was working part-time and there were personal trainers working full-time, quote unquote, full-time, and they maxed out at 30 hours. And that was for a reason, because 30 hours in that kind of world is full-time. And it's not just if you're working 30 client-facing hours, oh my gosh, like you're really actually working probably 40 or 50 hours total between communication with clients, between updating programs and plans and all that kind of stuff. And I'll say with what we do, I think 30 hours would be really intense to do client facing. Yeah, it's a lot. I have been there. I've actually been more than that too, which, probably led to my multiple rounds of burnout at different points in running this business. And, something to really think about, because when you're with a client, you're going to have to be on typically a little bit. And what that really means is just like, there's thinking, you're holding space for people and things like that. So, which can take some extra energy. And then there's, the behind the scenes stuff of like email communication and then, like putting plans and programs together, sending, nutrition plans or supplement plans or workout plans or whatever it is. That's a piece of it. But then you also have to run the business itself. So really something to think about is like, what is your capacity? And it is really easy to get burned out with client facing hours. And so once again, like really think about like, what are your limitations and how do you scale and grow to make the revenue that you would like and also not burn out? I know I keep saying this. One last thing, and this is something that once again, like I usually don't talk to people about this initially, but at some point in mentoring someone else, like this is something to really think about, is how much time are you spending in your business? And in your business, meaning like working with clients, client communication, coming up with resources, tools, like all that kind of stuff. And how much are you working on your business? On your business is about getting new clients, about growth, about expansion. If you want to continue to grow, you have to do both. And structuring your time at least a little bit. I'm not a huge like time block kind of person that just like, for me, my brain doesn't super work that way. I don't find it to be super beneficial. For some people, it's highly beneficial. And I do versions of time blocking in certain things. Um, but how much time are you spending in your business versus on your business? And if you're only spending time in your business and then you're frustrated and not growing, that's the reason, is because you're doing everything client facing. And what, for a lot of people, especially for in person businesses, I found this to be particularly the case that you need a time block first thing in your day to work on your business, because a lot of running a business is putting out fires, and things come up throughout the day that you have to work through, to talk through, to deal with, like all that kind of stuff. So that's a really important piece of like making sure you're structuring your time so you have time to work on your business and you're not just burning yourself working in your business. So, I probably could do a part two with this. So if you have questions, if you would like me to do a part two on this and maybe dive a little bit deeper into certain aspects of running the business, there's just so much to talk about in like building, running, growing a coaching business that I could talk for hours and hours and hours on this. So let me know if you want a part two, and if you do, let us know what you want me to talk about, and what kind of topics do you really want me to dive into in regards to that. So thank you for joining. Thank you for listening to this little bit of a different episode. As always, please like, subscribe, follow. If it resonates, 5-star reviews really, really, really mean the world to us. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.